And with that, welcome back. You're with Radio Free Canada. I'm Darin Howard.
And I'm Robert Nisbet.
This is December the 6th, 2012. A quickie for you. 15 minutes of information to help you mock Stephen Harper as we blaze a trail that corporate media cannot blaze. Why? Because corporate media isn't covering the whole story. So hang on. We're going to be expressing our opinion for 15 minutes.
That's right. We're going to be talking about our foreign policy and our domestic policy and how well that's working out for Canada.
And, of course, remember, everything you hear is protected under Section 2 of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms under free speech law.
And we will be presenting media that is protected under international fair use copyright.
So, if you're an in-the-box thinker,
if you believe that banks should continue making money up out of nowhere,
or if you believe that Canadian commercial banks like the Royal Bank should continue not paying income tax
and posting record profits,
if you are one of those in-the-box thinkers that thinks McDonald's is a restaurant,
or that CHBC is the news,
then stop listening now. Please stop listening. Don't get on our Facebook wall and say that we suck. We realize that's your opinion. You have every right to attend to that. This is one of the last shows on the old format. We're picking up video cameras, getting some lighting into the studio, and we are going to be coming to you live in person. So hang on for that upgrade coming with Radio Free Canada. But today, it's talking about our dictatorial leader, Mr. Robocall himself, Stephen Harper.
You mean how he's selling out all Canadian values and interests for money?
Yes. Actually, when it comes to selling out, I would have to say we've got Stephen Harper, Justin Bieber, and who else would you tack onto that?
Joe Flaherty?
Flaherty, yeah, definitely on that one. I would also, probably throw in Baird, any of those guys.
Baird, Clement, Tiny Tony.
Tiny Tony. Okay, so let's start things off with a real smile for you as we mock Stephen Harper, and we're going to be talking about the international front and the way he's making us look like a philosophical derriere. That's our robocall leader himself, Mr. Stephen Harper, every time that he speaks in the international forum. Rick Mercer's got it, and let's start things off.
Imagine, the leader of a G8 country boards a government aircraft in his nation's capital. He flies 12 hours to Vladivostok, Russia. Once there, he enters a hotel room. He orders his Minister of International Trade to sign a secret agreement with the Chinese government. This agreement will not be debated or voted on in Parliament. It will be ratified by Cabinet, once again in secret. So, is this a scene from the latest Bond movie? Sadly, no. It is the further adventures of Stephen Harper. Who is this guy? Since when do Canadian Prime Ministers sign secret agreements with the Chinese in Russia? Was Dr. Evil there? Was there a naked lady painted entirely in gold? Don't get me wrong, I'm not anti-trade. I expect that my government is out there negotiating trade agreements with countries, some of them totalitarian regimes. But that doesn't mean we have to act like them. Call me old-fashioned, but I believe citizens have a right to have some clue what their government is doing. And it's not like we haven't done this before. Canada signed a free trade agreement with the United States in 1988, but it was debated in Parliament. Heck, there was an election on it. We all got to vote on it. And by the way, that trade agreement with the United States, our closest friend and ally, could be canceled by either party with 6 months' notice. This agreement with the Chinese, 15 years' notice. Apparently, they insisted on that. Look, I have no idea if this agreement is a good thing or a bad thing, but I know this. This fetish for secrecy has to stop. This government got elected by promising to be accountable and transparent. By avoiding the accountable, they become more transparent every day.
And our own national treasure, Mr. Rick Mercer, starting things off.
Well, he really does nail it in that clip. It really does sound like the plot of a bad Bond movie.
When you start thinking about all these closed doors deals that they're signing right now, FIPA, F-I-P-A, is the first one. They're also
CETA.
Okay, free trade, of course, works so well for Canadians.
You must quote with your fingers in the air when you say free trade.
We're going to be covering the real story and what's really going on with radio, or with Canada, with Stephen Harper at the till.
Well, that last clip really talks about what's going on as far as our foreign policy is involved, because they are making secret deals all over the place. Fortunately, one media outlet has done their job, the CBC, and they recovered a leaked document out detailing the Harper government's foreign policy plans.
So we've got our own Canadian WikiLeaks happening here. Let's run the clip really quick so you're informed.
If you have noticed a change in the Harper government's relationships with other countries, a secret document leaked to CBC News seems to explain why. It shows a dramatic shift in foreign policy. The trade may trump all else. Laurie Graham has this national exclusive tonight. Laurie.
Peter, I received this envelope in my mailbox. In it, a draft copy of the government's foreign policy plan that would force Canada to reconsider its approach to countries that don't share our values. It's detailed and comes down to one thing: money. These days, the Prime Minister logs more kilometers than a traveling salesman. Under pressure to sell Canada to regions of the world he has largely ignored.
Canada and China enjoy a strategic partnership.
Brazil and Canada are natural partners. Canada is an energy superpower, and India has enormous energy needs.
But internal documents show moments like these are more than photo ops. They signal what's behind an ongoing shift in priorities. The draft copy of the new foreign policy plan received by CBC News, dated in September and marked secret, provides a roadmap for Harper's cabinet, setting out a foreign policy that takes a sharp turn from west to east and to Africa and South America, and is driven by the government's top priority, the economy. We need to be frank with ourselves. Our influence and credibility with some of these new and emerging powers is not as strong as it needs to be and could be. Harper has had only 2 official visits to China since taking office in 2006. This was his view back then.
But I don't think Canadians want us to sell out important Canadian values, our belief in democracy, freedom, human rights. They don't want to sell that out to the almighty dollar.
But this draft foreign policy would suggest a rethink. 21st century foreign policy must lead with the economy. The documents are a blunt self-assessment of the government for taking too long to get to the trade table. Canada's record over past decades has been to arrive late in some key emerging markets. We cannot afford to do so in the future. Today, in front of a business crowd, Harper emphasized Canada's need to be a player.
We obviously always want to be central in the network of global trade agreements.
Despite Harper's recent push, Canada still does not have a free trade deal with anyone in the Asia-Pacific region, and negotiations with India, Singapore, and South Korea all stalled. The situation is stark. As a country, we must become more relevant to our new partners. The draft foreign policy also includes expanded trade with Brazil, the world's 6th largest economy with a fast-growing middle class. And Africa, a part of the world Harper recently visited for the first time since 2007.
I came here with some reluctance. I won't kid you on that. But I think it was worthwhile.
The plan takes a long-range view and estimates that by 2050, 80% of future global growth will be from emerging markets, Asia, South America, and Africa, which currently represent only 8% of Canada's trade. The stakes are high. Canada's future prosperity is linked to the success of these countries. To succeed, we will need to pursue political relationships in tandem with economic interests, even where political interests or values may not align. There's very little in the plan about Canada's values, human rights, or international aid. In an email response tonight, Foreign Affairs says it doesn't comment on leaked documents, but says Canada continues to pursue a principled foreign policy that is advancing Canadian interests and Canadian values. Peter.
All right, Laurie. Thank you. Laurie Graham in Ottawa tonight.
That clip from the CBC, and we're so happy to bring it to you right here at Radio Free Canada.
Well, it is refreshing to see the mainstream media actually doing investigative journalism.
You know, it's kind of funny because foreign, overseas, everyone sees the nonsense for what it is. Okay, they realize that China is going to profit from our raw resources. They're already profiting from our raw trees. Now they're trying to build pipelines to take out raw bitumen.
Yeah, so it seems we're sacrificing everything as far as our values are concerned for the almighty dollar, in spite of what Mr. Harper said.
And, you know, you see that foreign policy that's only driven around the economy, of course. All you have to do is replace the word economy with bank profits, and you'll understand what they're talking about, because it's banks that back up all of these companies.
Or business profits. It's the same thing, though.
An excellent read. An excellent read is Eve Engler, the ugly Canadian. In there, Chapter 2, Mining the World, talks about foreign policy for what it is.
It just seems to be on the side of the mining corporations.
It's kind of strange because Stephen Harper said in April of 2012, April of this year, Canadians are justly proud of our mining industry for its elevated sense of corporate and social responsibility.
Really? What kind of newspeak is that?
That was the quote, believe it or not. But we know what it means, what they're talking about in trade, what they're talking about with free trade is getting our corporations going, either resources coming in or resources going out. Let's take a look at this.
Yeah.
You make up your own mind.
Last Sunday, we told you about a group of Indigenous people from Guatemala in Canada seeking justice. Now, an update on their story. This small group of villagers says Canadian mining company Hudbay is responsible for horrific crimes. And as the CBC's Joanna Romiliotis explains, to get the justice they want, they have a long road ahead.
Margarita Cal's story of gang rape is just one from this group of Guatemalan farmers who've come to Toronto to be cross-examined by lawyers representing Hudbay, a Canadian mining company. They're suing Hudbay for what they claim the security forces hired by the company did to them in Guatemala. German Chugchok is one of the plaintiffs who says he was left paralyzed when he was shot during a protest against Hudbay. For him, for all of them, the journey has been emotionally wrenching. This is not the first lawsuit of its kind filed against a Canadian company operating abroad. But the fact the plaintiffs are here and speaking publicly is extraordinary and has made a far-off story an achingly human one.
It is giving Canada a terrible reputation.
Advocates say Canada's mining industry has a track record of human rights and environmental abuses, and has the political backing in Canada and abroad to often act with impunity.
The Canadian mining industry is huge, it's growing, it's exploitative, it's giving Canada a terrible black eye in the global sense.
It's why there have been private members' bills pushing for more corporate responsibility. The NDP's Bill C-323 is the latest one.
I would argue that there's a way here, but with the Conservatives, there doesn't seem to be a will. And we have to get a hold of this because there's going to be many more court cases brought forward unless we figure out a way to deal with in a sensible way.
They know very well that this is a broad political struggle and that though they ought to get justice in the Canadian courts, that's not a guarantee and whatsoever. And personally, I think it's quite remote.
And you know, you got to take your hats off to these guys for coming down and trying to represent themselves.
Even though they really believe that nothing's going to happen in their favor.
You know, never ever get discouraged about it because change can be made just by showing up. We saw that First Nations leaders stormed Parliament, and we're going to be coming up with some segments talking about the way that they're getting railroaded. And, of course, the fact that the news ignores the native side of the story.
While our government and business don't care about Indigenous people in our country, why should they care about them in other countries?
I know. You're not going to get that kind of behavior. You're not going to get responsible behavior out of our Canadian government. We are proud to be here for you, Radio Free Canada, with your quickies for the day, 15-minute segment production, so you've got a little bit of background. But once again, Don't believe us. Do your own research. Get out there.
That's right. Keep on listening. We'll be talking more about how our relationship with Israel has come to the forefront of the world's attention.
Oh, man. We've got segments coming up talking about GMOs, talking about smart meters, talking about police brutality, and that's coming up just for you. Remember, Police Brutality 2012 is the video we're going to be promoting quite a bit of in the next month. I am Darin Howard.
And I am Robert Nisbet, and this is Radio Free Canada.